And we're live.
Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. Today I want to talk to you about the Dr. P.H. Martin's HYDRUS watercolours. So what's the difference with these? They're watercolour, they're light fast, they're archival, but they're in a liquid form. So yes, you can make traditional watercolours from the tube or the pan wet. So why would I choose to use the liquid HYDRUS? Because it's liquid, and you'll see once I start using it how intense the colours are, because it's really strong, intense colour, already very wet. And so you actually need very little, and you can work really strongly, and then you can have fun, which I will do in my demonstration in a minute. So I have a set, I've got set 2, and as always I've done swatches. It gives me an idea of the colour, because you can't always tell the colour, because this is this colour from the bottle. And so by putting it down onto a paper, I then know if I'm going to start a painting, I have an idea of what colours I want to use. So let's have a quick look at some of these colours. I'm just going to drop just a drop. Also, it makes mixing very easy, because I can do 1 drop of the red. You'll see I'm shaking. I just need to reactivate the pigments, because if they've been laid down for a while, like they are in this set, the pigment tends to settle on the bottom. If I shake too vigorously, I will create air bubbles. But if you just gently swirl like that, it's fine. Great also, because I can pick up using the dropper, and I can drop 1 drop in, and I know that I can pretty much duplicate that mix of colour again. So you can see there I've made a lovely orangey red, and I know, like I say, if I have 1 drop of yellow, 1 drop of that red, I'm going to make that colour again. So let's have a look at the neat colours. So that red, picking some up, and you can see straight away how lovely and fluid that colour is. Sometimes I just drop it onto the paper and just see how it works. That way, drop it on and move it straight from the drop of paint. So it is a watercolour, all the same values of watercolour. I can re-wet. Some colours are staining the same as a watercolour, but with it being liquid form, I know I'm going to get really strong, intense colours. So straight on to a little demonstration. I've chosen tomatoes. Again, I'm not going to be using too many different colours. There's lots of colours in the set, but I'm going to stick with colours I'm comfortable with: the red, the yellow and the blue. So Thalow's a bit too dark, so I'm going to go for the ultramarine. There are pre-mixed colours like the greens and the purples, which are great, and I have no problem with people using pre-mixed colours. What is good fun is to learn how to mix your own colours, because you come up with some surprises. So in a set you'll find a nice green and purple, use it. Have fun, learn how materials work, and then next stage, learn what colours mix together. So I'm just going to do this red tomato, giving it a wash of yellow, and you can see what I have to be quite careful with is, because it goes on quite strong, I actually find it quite difficult to soften the colours. So that's why I only put a very small amount out on my palette, because the colours are so strong that when I pick them up, they go on very quickly. So that's a bit better, because that's mostly water, and I'm really starting, you can see on my palette, I'm moving it out a little bit just to drop the intensity of colour. So very small drop, and it will go a long way. Now I've put that initial yellow on, I know this pink or red, if I put it on top, will just bleed in and create that lovely orange-red colour I'm looking for. Again, I'm looking for the colours to mix and be a little bit much subtler on this first application, because I can add the stronger tones at a later date. Just following the shape of the tomato. If I follow the shape, you will end up with a much better tonal shape in the colour. I'll show you when I start to put some of the other colours on the greens. So starting off with colours which are quite vibrant, and I'll fade into the background. This may still be wet, which is good. I'm using quite a big brush because I was trying this with a small brush and I was getting frustrated because I was fiddling too much. Just let the paint go onto the paper and create its own shapes. I have control. I'm not too worried about where things are going. You will know it's a tomato in the end. A lot of the beauty about watercolour is it can be unpredictable in a predictable way. So, which sounds quite a odd thing to say, but you'll put the colour on and it will often move in a way you weren't expecting, but in a wonderful way, in an organic way, and often if you wanted to replicate that way, you couldn't do it again. So leave those. I'm going to go on to the green, because I find if I put the colour down now, I'm not going to keep overworking other areas, and you can see how that started to work itself. It's starting to almost finish itself. So the next one is green. So just clean my brush, which I'm terrible at. Put a layer of the yellow down again. Same yellow. This is why I like to keep a few colours on these demonstrations, because if you use the same colours throughout, it harmonises the whole picture and draws it together. Just do all the areas, just trying to think about where I might want to retain some of the white paper. And this one going to be in the background. So very simple shapes, a circle and a circle. It's how you put it together. So now I've got that yellow and the ultramarine. I'm just going to see what greens it makes. That's nice. So you can see now I'm just adding the green on while it's still wet, and see how I'm following the shape of the edges, the tomato, the roundness, because that really does help bring the colours together. And if I just bring the lines like that, it will create its own shape. This has bled into the other one, which is nice actually. And I will be using that technique, that bleeding into the other colours towards the end, and you'll see how much fun you can have with the HYDRUS. So for me, it helps plot out colour. It helps me see where I need to work. If I get it down quickly, I often stop myself overworking because I've already got the tones and values, and the paint has created its own shapes and patterns, done the work for me, which is always a good thing. That's dried a little bit. I want to really wet that back because I don't want that to be as sharp as the ones in the foreground, to soften it. Again, just thinking maybe where I want to touch on some light. Okay, so you can see how they're already starting to build up. So these two in the foreground have had chance to dry, I'm just going to drop down to a smaller brush because I want to now start to use a little bit more of the tonal values and build it up, but I don't want to overwork. So look at that lovely colour and how the next layer is really so much stronger. I don't want to put too many layers on because if I do, I find I tend to muddy the shapes. And I'm not going to put it over all those beautiful colours that are under there already. Again, I'm thinking about the shape of the tomato. It's round, so my brush strokes are representing that roundness, that shape. Okay, maybe I need a little bit stronger. Okay, let's drop it in. I like nice, strong, intense colours, so for me, these are really wonderful to use. Creating the soft, subtle colours are a little bit more challenging for me, which is why I'm using these, because they work and I enjoy using the strength. Okay, I think that's given that a little bit more value. Let's work on this one. So using some of that pink red and some of the yellow I had on my palette, and just now bringing up some of the detail. Now I'm being quite careful where I place my paint, and you'll see as I move on to the latter stages, I'm going to let the paint run a little bit more freely. Okay, now looking at this, I feel I just need to change the tone value. Yes, I wanted to hit some light, but I don't think it was working. Right, another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out the leaves, because then it would tie it all together. So I'm not going to overwork any of these areas until I put it all together. Another drop. You see, this will last a really long time, this paint, because you just use so little. So made a green. I'm not sure if it's too bright because the yellow is quite a bright yellow. So I'm just adding a little bit of the red to dull it down. So bring out the stems of the tomato. Now these are quite fuzzy. They've got hairs all over them. And I will represent that at the end. Just want to put on and plot out where the shapes are for the leaves. And by doing that, I can also plot out where my shadows will want to be. Because I've lost some of the shapes by using the paint, just thinking, each time I put a marker, I'm just thinking, is that leaf in front of or behind? What do I need to show? How many leaves does the plant have? Is that a good shape? So I'm constantly thinking and manipulating what I'm seeing from the photograph and what I'm putting on my page. It doesn't have to be an exact replica unless you're doing a portrait and you want to get a good representation. A tomato is a tomato. They're round and red. So as long as you get that representational part, how much detail you put in it is totally up to you. And I know a lot of people complain, it's got muddy. And that's basically because you just keep working. And we all do that. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone, should have stopped. And I'm constantly telling others to stop. But I can't always follow the rules myself. You just walk away from something, have a drink, come back when it's at this stage. So I'm just going to put these leaves on and I'll have a short break. because that will give me chance just to look, review, evaluate and think about what else I want to put on, what other areas I want to work on before I go into the background. So I'm just putting, you can see I'm not being really careful, overly careful. No, put that leaf is there, this leaf, and I know this one actually goes behind the stem, which makes it a little bit fun. Stem, just want to make it a little bit, and like I said, they have leaves all over it, so I'm going to try and create some of that texture while it's still a little wet by not really controlling and making a nice smooth shape. Okay, so I think that's good for now. We'll have a short break. I'll have time to evaluate and I can come back and then we can get on with fine detail and the background. So join me in a few minutes.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing about being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I could shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
Hello and welcome back. So while you've been watching that advert, I've had a chance to just look at the shapes I've got on here, and there's a couple of areas I want to fix. I could have done it while you're away, but I want to just explain why it is really useful to walk away. Here, this tomato at the back doesn't really, it's lost some of its shape, it's making that halo. When you put a subject and a subject on top of the subject and you paint it, because you're painting different colours, you do sometimes end up with this little halo around each one to separate them. So I've had a chance to look and evaluate, and now I can see where I need to work on areas. So even after a short time, sometimes it's worth going back and not always rushing to get things done. If you know and you've done the subject before, you're familiar with it. Each different painting you do, or each painting of the same thing you do, you learn each time. You kind of think, that area worked really well. That wasn't quite as effective as I would have liked, or wasn't what I was trying to achieve. So when I do a workshop, as long as I hear, oh, next time I think I want to work on that bit, and I think that is a really wonderful thing to hear. It means you want to move on, you want to learn, you want to carry on and try and work on areas that you didn't like and fix them, so it's much better. So again, I'm trying not to, tomatoes have a lovely smooth skin, so I'm trying to show that characteristic. This one, again, there's a little halo around where it doesn't quite touch the red tomato in front. But I wouldn't have noticed that if I'd carried on working. It was only because I'd had that short break I was able just to see. Right, I'm going to go a bit stronger, just using the neat blue. You can see how strong that blue is, but if I use it sparingly, I will be able to create the effects I'm looking for. Bring out the bottom of the leaves, bring out a little bit of shadow under here. And I'm not working too much on this one. I quite like how that is. I want to keep that really soft and kind of like not as detailed. It's further back, so I'm just indicating that there's another colour there. Okay. So move on to these leaves. Add a little bit more dark, and like I said, this one actually goes behind. Okay, create that soft effect. Not finished yet. I still would like to put some more detail and tone on, but I'm going to do that last, because I find by putting that real dark areas on, if I carried on doing it now, I'd probably keep working. So I'm going to do the background to give me some areas to concentrate on. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm just changing brushes. I'm using a natural hair brush because I want to wet the page. And natural hair brushes are designed to hold water. So I'm just wetting the background. And we'll have some fun with the paints in the bottles. Just again, making sure I go up to the paint because I actually want it to run into each other. I know I've done nice sharp edges, but when you see the background, you'll see how I can just create a little bit more movement. So just clean water. Sometimes I use tinted water so I can see where I've been, but it depends on the freshness of the colour I want to keep. So wet, very wet. This paper's holding the wet nicely. It's a heavier weight paper because I knew I'd be getting it quite wet. So though I can see it is bowing a little bit, it's not going to create real cockles or waves. I could have stretched it or taped it down, but I quite like some of the unpredictability of the watercolour and the paper. So trying to soften this. So as far as I can see, that seems quite wet all over. So what I discovered when I was playing was when you drop the colours in, they just explode with colour. Look at that. Some of that red. And that's a lot stronger. Wow. Depends how wet the page is, how much they explode. And some blue. Okay, so that looks quite intense at the moment. Not too worried, because what I can do is I can dab down. Just keep moving my tissue around because I don't want to over-contaminate the colours. Running out. Oh, now I've got a clean bit here. Okay. And yes, I will have some halos, but I can fix those. So now I can do is pick up some of the colour on the page and just push it into the tomatoes. Just, if I catch the edge, depends how wet it was to start with, it will run in and it will bleed into the background, which I think is really nice. I think this is a bit too dry, it's quite warm in the studio. So just using the colours that are there in the background. Bring it up and just indicate that it isn't all random. So a nice mix of randomality, if that's a word, mixed with a little bit of control can really add movement to your painting. But I just love the way that they burst on the page. It was a real surprise how much they did that. And the colours, the strength of colour. So just softening around, just making sure that the background and the foreground meet and are all part of the one painting, not separate. And then I can now start to put the colours on, the darker tones on. Yes, it's a very bright, strong painting, which is, to be fair, what I like to do. Three colours, red, yellow, blue. I know I should really use a little bit more, but I think it works. It works for me. And I can have fun with the colours I've got. Okay. Step back. And there we go. So while that background's drying, and maybe want to just take back a little bit of that red, I can now just finish off with a little bit more strength. So some of that yellow, some of the red. So the colours are strong. They do, as with watercolours, they do dry a little bit lighter. So now I'm just going into a neat colour, add some blue to just think about where I'm going to bring out some shadow underneath, and hopefully you'll see this will bleed into the background, which is the effect I was trying to achieve. Under here will be dark where the leaves are, and they do have some indication of lines. That's nice. Let's try this one. See if I can bleed into the background with this. Have them together and not two separate parts. Okay, it's bleeding a little bit. Just softening those edges. Okay. I want to, just while the paint's still wet, just really add that last tonal value. Okay. And the reason I've left this till last is because you can see how little you need to do. It's going to be dark under here if the light's coming from that kind of direction. I'm taking some of this red into the leaves. Again, just keeping the colours together so they kind of harmonise with each other. Just now adding some final details. I probably would have stepped back and re-looked at this and had a little bit more time away, but I'm going to finish this for you. So green, some stronger blue, and some more of the yellow, and again this time a touch of the red just to make a much more natural green. Darkness here around the background because it is behind. Just think about the shape because they have these lovely roundness. A little bit here. I think it's dried a little bit too much for it to bleed into the background, but that doesn't matter. I think it's working quite effectively. Just wet brush to soften any harsh edges. And this last one, though I did want it to be a lot softer, I just need to give it a little bit more tone, else it just looks very flat. So much more water than I am putting on pigment. Okay, one last thing, I need to just make sure I'm telling you that we do have a stalk, and like I said, it is quite fuzzy, so this is where I really would have liked this to have bled a little bit more into the background. See if I can dampen, soften. That's working quite nice actually. Okay, those last final touches which bring it all together, because I'm finding a few halos, areas that aren't touching. Last one, I can just really see, I want to just really darken. I'm always a bit careful with that last final area you want to darken, but I think it is important because it just suddenly makes everything ping and drop together. Okay, that's it. That's all I'm going to do, because I know I'll just keep fiddling and working on, but you can see the bright intensity of the liquid HYDRUS watercolours. So they're archival, they're light fast, they're watercolour in a liquid form. So, excuse me, have a lot of fun and just try and see the potential of the product. So join us later in the week for another live demonstration with Denise Allen, who will be doing a live workshop and demonstration.